The North Atlantic, November 1st, 1943, 1 o'clock in the morning. 15-foot waves crash against the hull of the USS Borie as she cuts through the darkness. A storm rages across the black water. Inside the cramped bridge, radar screens glow green in the dim light. Young sailors peer into the instruments, searching, hunting. Then, a blip appears on the screen, 8,000 yards away, bearing 170. 30-year-old Lieutenant Charles Harris Hutchins doesn't hesitate. Maximum speed. Give chase. The destroyer surges forward, her engine screaming as she powers through the mountainous seas. But they don't know what's waiting for them in the darkness. 5 nautical miles away, beneath the cover of night, a German submarine sits on the surface. U-405, a Type 7C U-boat. Inside, 45 men breathe recycled air. The batteries are recharging. The captain, Korvettenkapitän Rolf-Heinrich Hopman, believes they're safe under darkness. He's wrong. Deep within the submarine, the hydrophone operator presses his headphones tighter against his ears. There's something out there, a sound, distant, growing closer. The unmistakable churning of propellers slicing through water, fast, too fast. The operator's voice cuts through the submarine. High-speed ship, bearing 90. Hopman knows. No German ships are in this area. This is American. Alarms scream through the U-boat. Men scramble to their stations, prepare to dive. Battle stations. The hunt has begun. But what neither commander knows, what neither man could possibly imagine, is that in the next few hours, these two vessels will collide in one of the most brutal, desperate, and savage naval battles of World War II. A battle fought not with missiles from miles away, but with guns, knives, and bare hands. A battle where men will fight face to face across the decks of their ships. A battle that will leave both vessels destroyed and dozens of men at the mercy of the freezing Atlantic. This is the story of the USS Borie's last stand. The year is 1943, and the Battle of the Atlantic has entered its deadliest phase. German U-boats prowl the waters between America and Europe, hunting Allied convoys that carry the lifeblood of the war effort: food, ammunition, tanks, planes, fuel. Everything Britain needs to survive crosses these dark waters, and the U-boats are waiting. The USS Borie is a Gleaves-class destroyer. She was commissioned in 1941, and for 2 years she has hunted submarines across the Atlantic. She's equipped with sonar, radar, depth charges, torpedoes, and guns. Her crew of 122 men knows their mission: find the U-boats before they find Allied ships. Sink them, send them to the bottom of the ocean. Tonight, they're part of a larger hunter-killer group, but a storm has separated the ships. The Borie is alone now, searching through waves that tower over her deck. The wind howls, rain lashes the bridge windows. Visibility is nearly zero. But radar doesn't need visibility. Lieutenant Charles Harris Hutchins stands in the bridge studying the green screen. He's only 30 years old, but he's proven himself as a capable commander. Calm under pressure, decisive. His crew trusts him. In the submarine war, trust means survival. The radar operator's voice breaks the tension. Contact. 8,000 yards, bearing 170. Hutchins' mind races through the calculations. Size of the contact, speed, direction. Could be a fishing vessel. Could be debris. Could be a surfaced U-boat recharging its batteries. Only one way to find out. Turn 170, flank speed. The order echoes through the ship. In the engine room, men push the turbines to maximum power. The destroyer leaps forward, her bow rising and crashing through the waves. Water explodes across the deck. The ship shudders with each impact, but she holds her course. In the cramped bridge, men grip whatever they can find as the ship pitches and rolls. The radar operator keeps his eyes locked on the screen, calling out ranges: 7,000 yards, 6,000, 5,000. They're closing fast. Aboard U-405, Korvettenkapitän Rolf-Heinrich Hopman stands in the control room of his submarine. He's an experienced commander. He knows the Atlantic like the back of his hand. He's hunted convoys, evaded destroyers, survived depth charge attacks. But experience also teaches caution. The hydrophone operator's report sends ice through his veins. High-speed ship, bearing 90, approaching rapidly. There are no German ships in this area, no other U-boats. This has to be Allied, and if it's moving that fast, it's not a merchant vessel, it's a warship, probably a destroyer, and it's hunting them. Hopman's orders come rapid fire, prepare to dive, all crewed to battle stations. The alarm sounds. It's the noise every submariner knows and dreads, the noise that means they've been found, the noise that means they're about to go deep and hope the enemy loses them in the dark water below. Men rush through the submarine's narrow corridors, hatches shut, valves turn, the U-boat begins to slip beneath the surface. Water floods into the ballast tanks, the deck tilts forward, the submarine descends into the black Atlantic depths. On the surface, 45 German sailors leave behind the storm and the wind. Down here, there's only the creaking of the hull, the hum of the electric motors, and the sound of their own breathing. Down here, they're safe from the guns and torpedoes of the surface ships. But they're not safe from depth charges. Hopman orders silent running, the electric motors slow to their quietest setting. Every man aboard knows the drill. No talking, no unnecessary movement. Listen for the enemy, wait for orders. The hydrophone operator presses his headphones against his ears, concentrating. He can hear the destroyer's propellers, the rhythmic churning of the screws, the regular ping of sonar pulses searching through the water. The sounds are growing louder. The destroyer is getting closer. On USS Borie, Lieutenant Hutchins watches as the radar contact disappears from the screen. The operator reports what everyone in the bridge already knows. Contact lost. Hutchins feels the cold weight of realization. The target has submerged. That means it knows they're here. That means it's a submarine. That means the Germans are now running silent somewhere beneath them, listening, waiting for a chance to strike back with torpedoes. The hunt has changed. Now it's not about speed. It's about patience, about skill, about the men operating the sonar equipment, sending sound waves through the water and listening for the echoes that bounce back from the submarine's metal hull. Hutchins orders the ship to half speed. The roar of the engines diminishes. The ship slows, making it easier for the sonar operators to hear. In the sonar compartment, men watch their instruments with intense concentration. The sea is full of sounds. Waves, marine life, debris. The storm above creates a constant background noise. Finding a submarine in all that chaos is like finding a whisper in a hurricane. But they're trained for this. They know what to listen for. They know the unique acoustic signature of a U-boat's electric motors, the subtle difference between a school of fish and a metal hull. Then, there, a contact, faint but distinct, 2,000 yards. Bearing 170. Hutchins orders the course correction immediately. Turn 170. They're going after it. Below, on the U-boat, the hydrophone operator hears the destroyer changing course. He can tell the general direction, but the data isn't precise enough for a counterattack. The U-boat's torpedoes are deadly accurate, but only if they know exactly where the target is. Right now, all they know is that the enemy is somewhere above them, getting closer. The propeller sounds grow louder, the sonar pings come faster, more insistent. The Americans are narrowing in. The German hydrophone operator's voice is tight with tension. They're very close, Captain. Hopman makes a decision. Turn to port. Try to slip away before the destroyer gets into position. The U-boat banks, its electric motors humming as it changes course. But it's too late. On the Borie, the sonar operators track the submarine's movement. 600 yards. Close enough. Hutchins gives the order. Prepare port launchers for depth charges.
Men rush to the depth charge racks mounted on the side of the ship. These weapons are simple but devastating, cylindrical metal drums filled with high explosives, designed to detonate at a preset depth. The pressure wave from the explosion can crack a submarine's hull like an eggshell. The crew readies the release mechanisms. They wait for the order. Then the sonar trace shifts. The submarine has moved directly beneath the ship's keel, into the blind spot where sonar can't reach. Contact lost. But the sonar operators are good. They pick up the submarine again as it emerges from the blind spot. 500 yards, now bearing starboard, moving fast. Hutchins doesn't hesitate. Full to starboard. The destroyer heels over, turning hard to pursue the submarine. The stern swings around, bringing the depth charge racks to bear on the target. 300 yards. Fire! The depth charges launch with metallic thunks. They arc through the air, trailing spray. They splash into the water and disappear beneath the waves, sinking rapidly toward their preset depth. Then the ocean erupts. The explosions are massive. Columns of water shoot 50 feet into the air. The shock waves travel through the water at incredible speed, far faster than they would through air. Inside U-405, the world becomes chaos. The submarine is rocked by the blasts. The pressure wave hits the bow like a giant hammer. Metal groans, rivets pop, men are thrown against bulkheads. Equipment tears loose from its mountings. The lights flicker and go out, plunging the submarine into darkness. Emergency lighting kicks in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Damage reports flood into the control room. Flooding in the bow. The seals have failed. Water is pouring in. Hopman knows what this means. When a submarine is submerged, the water pressure outside the hull is enormous. Trying to stop a leak at depth is nearly impossible. The water comes in faster than the pumps can remove it. The submarine will flood. It will sink. There's only one option: surface, and man the guns. It's a desperate move. On the surface, the U-boat loses its greatest advantage: concealment. On the surface, it's vulnerable to the destroyer's guns. But staying submerged means drowning. At least on the surface, they can fight. The ballast tanks blow. High-pressure air forces the water out. The submarine's bow tilts up. The electric motors push them toward the surface. On the USS Borie, sailors watch the water where the depth charges exploded. The sea is still churning, still settling. Then, without warning, the submarine bursts from beneath the waves. It surfaces right on their stern. Water cascades off its hull. The conning tower rises, dripping. Hatches fly open. Someone shouts the alert. "It surfaced on our stern!" Hutchins reacts immediately. "Turn on the searchlight. Inform the gunners where to point." The powerful searchlight mounted on the destroyer's superstructure swivels toward the submarine. The beam cuts through the darkness and the spray. It locks onto U-405, illuminating it in harsh white light. What they see makes their blood run cold. Germans are pouring out of the hatches. Not just a few men, but dozens. They're scrambling across the wet deck, fighting the wind and the waves, and they're rushing to their guns. U-405 is armed with two 20mm anti-aircraft guns and one 88mm deck gun. The 20mm cannons are already manned. German sailors brace themselves against the rolling deck and open fire. The guns come alive with sharp, rapid bangs. Tracers streak across the water. The shells cover the distance in seconds and slam into the USS Borie's hull and superstructure. American sailors dive for cover as metal fragments fly through the air. Shells punch holes through thin plating. Windows shatter. Men shout warnings. On the U-boat's deck, German sailors brave the storm. The waves wash over them, threatening to sweep them into the sea. The destroyer's searchlight shines directly in their faces, blinding them. But they keep firing. They know their survival depends on it. The 20mm guns continue their rapid fire, stitching lines of shells across the destroyer's hull. But the Germans know these small-caliber weapons won't be enough. They need the 88mm deck gun. That weapon can punch through armor. That weapon can cripple the destroyer. German sailors scramble to ready the 88mm. They fight against the wind and the waves, trying to load the heavy shells. On the USS Borie, Lieutenant Hutchins sees what they're doing. He knows the danger. If that 88mm gun opens fire, his ship is in serious trouble. He has to stop them before they get it operational. All guns, local control, pointer fire. The order means every gun on the ship can fire independently at the submarine. No waiting for coordinated salvos, just point and shoot. The destroyer's guns open fire. The Borie is armed with 4 4-inch main guns, several 20mm cannons, and .5 caliber machine guns. All of them swing toward the illuminated U-boat. All of them open fire. The noise is deafening. The muzzle flashes light up the night. Shell casings clatter onto the deck. The air fills with the smell of cordite. The first salvos fly over the Germans' heads. The gunners are adjusting for range, for the rolling seas, for the movement of both ships. Shells splash into the water behind the U-boat. But it doesn't take long. The American gunners find their mark. 20mm shells crash through the U-boat's forecastle. The Germans manning the deck guns don't stand a chance. Shells tear through flesh and metal. Men fall. Blood mixes with seawater on the deck. The German crew on the 88mm gun are hit. They're torn apart by the incoming fire. They slide across the deck and into the ocean. More Germans rush to replace them. They're determined. They're brave. They know if they can get that gun firing, they might survive this duel. But Hutchins won't give them the chance. The destroyer's 4-inch guns adjust their aim. The gunners center their sights on the forecastle, on the 88mm gun, on the men desperately trying to bring it into action. The Germans reach the gun. They try to aim it. They look down the sights toward the destroyer, and they find themselves staring directly at 4 4-inch guns pointed right at them. The destroyer fires. The shells slam into the forecastle with devastating force. The explosions tear through metal. The 88mm gun is blown apart. The men manning it disappear in the blast. When the smoke clears, the forward section of the U-boat's deck is a wreck. The 88mm gun is gone. Its crew is gone. The USS Borie continues its wide turn, its guns pummeling the submarine without mercy. Shells rain down on the U-boat's hull and conning tower. Metal sparks, fragments fly. The Germans, still on deck, try to return fire with their remaining 20mm gun, but the fire is sporadic now. Desperate. Hutchins watches through his binoculars. They're tearing the submarine apart, but he knows the truth. Surface fire won't sink it. The U-boat's pressure hull is too strong. Shells that would devastate a surface ship just bounce off the submarine's thick metal skin. They need a direct hit below the waterline. They need to breach the pressure hull. They need to crack it open and let the sea in. There's only one way to do that. Ram it. The order echoes through the bridge. Ram it. Some of the crew look at Hutchins with shock. Ramming is a desperate tactic. It could damage the destroyer as much as the submarine. It could breach their own hull. It could sink them both. But Hutchins knows there's no other option. They can't let the U-boat escape, and they can't sink it with guns alone. The helmsman acknowledges the order. He steers the ship toward the submarine. Hutchins grabs the intercom. "Stand by for a ram! Stand by for a ram!" Throughout the ship, men brace themselves. They grab onto railings, pipeworks, anything bolted down. They prepare for the impact. The destroyer barrels down on the submarine at 27 knots. The distance closes rapidly. 500 yards, 400, 300.
On the U-boat, the Germans see the destroyer turning toward them. They see the bow cutting through the waves, aimed directly at their midsection. Some men dive back into the hatches. Others brace for impact. 200 yards, 100. The USS Borie crashes into the side of U-405. The impact is tremendous. Metal screams against metal. The submarine's hull buckles. The destroyer's bow crumples. The two vessels lock together, wedged at an angle. Deep inside the USS Borie, Chief Engineer Kenneth Miles Lucas is thrown against a bulkhead. He recovers quickly and looks around the engine room.
What he sees makes his heart sink. Water. Torrents of water gushing through fissures in the hull. The ram has opened seams in the destroyer's bow. The ocean is flooding in. Lucas doesn't panic. He's trained for this. Get me the repair team. Men rush to stem the flooding. They hammer wooden wedges into the cracks. They shore up damaged bulkheads with timbers. They work frantically as the water rises around their legs. On deck, chaos erupts. The two ships are locked together. The destroyer looms over the submarine. The decks are only feet apart, and the men on both sides realize this battle is about to become personal. In the U-boat's control room, Hopman pulls himself to his feet after the impact. The situation is desperate, but he's not surrendering. Not yet. Attack! German sailors charge out of the hatches. They carry pistols, rifles, anything they can find. They emerge onto the deck, ready to fight. On the USS Borie, American sailors grab whatever weapons are at hand. Tommy guns, M1911 pistols, M1 Garand rifles. They lean over the railing and open fire on the Germans below. A massive firefight breaks out. Tracers fly back and forth in the darkness. Men shout. Guns crack. The sound echoes across the empty ocean. The Americans have the advantage. They're shooting down from the elevated destroyer deck. They have cover behind the railing. The Germans are exposed on the submarine's narrow deck. But some of the American sailors don't have firearms, so they improvise. They fire flare guns at the Germans. The burning magnesium projectiles arc through the air. They grab empty shell casings from the deck guns and hurl them down onto the U-boat. They throw the heavy, misfired shells themselves, using them as improvised grenades. One sailor even runs to the galley and comes back with kitchen knives, throwing them down at the enemy. It's brutal. It's desperate. It's unlike any naval battle fought in this war. The Germans fight back with everything they have, but they're being cut down. The U-boat's deck offers no protection. Men fall. They slide across the blood-slicked metal. Some tumble into the churning sea between the two vessels. After minutes that feel like hours, the last of U-405's defenders falls silent. The submarine is incredibly still afloat. Its pressure hull is damaged but not breached. The diesels are still functional, but the crew is devastated. They've lost 30 men. They've lost all their deck guns. All they have left are the torpedoes loaded in their tubes, and Hopman intends to use them. Full back, hard to port. The U-boat's diesel engines roar to life. The submarine pulls with all its power, trying to tear free from the destroyer's grasp. The two hulls grind against each other. Slowly, gradually, the U-boat starts to slip away. On the destroyer, American sailors watch in disbelief as the submarine begins to move underneath them. After everything they've done, the U-boat is escaping. Deep in the USS Borie's engine compartment, Chief Engineer Kenneth Miles Lucas and his men battle their own desperate fight. The water has risen to their waists. The repair teams have managed to slow the flooding, but they can't stop it. The ram opened too many seams. The damage is too extensive. But Lucas isn't giving up. They need the engines. Without power, they're dead in the water, and a destroyer that can't move is a target. The engineers continue working the turbines. They wade through the rising water. When the water gets too high to stand, they dive beneath the surface to reach the valves. They hold their breath, make the adjustments, and surface gasping for air. The engines keep running. The ship keeps moving, but Lucas knows they're on borrowed time. On deck, the gunners haven't stopped firing. Even as the submarine slips away, they continue to pour shells into it. They aim for the conning tower, the hatches, anywhere that might cause critical damage. But they need a finishing blow. They need to ensure this submarine never threatens Allied shipping again. One of the destroyer's triple torpedo mounts swivels toward the submarine. The torpedo crew works quickly, making the final adjustments. They have one shot at this. The range is close, but in these heavy seas, nothing is certain. Fire. A massive Mark 15 torpedo blasts out of the tube. It hits the water and its motor ignites. It tears a white path through the dark ocean, heading straight for U-405. But the seas are rough. The submarine is moving. The torpedo's gyroscope struggles to maintain course. It misses. The torpedo passes behind the U-boat and disappears into the night. On the submarine, Hopman watches the torpedo's wake pass astern. That was too close. His submarine is battered. His crew is down to 15 men out of the original 45. But they're still alive, they're still fighting, and they still have torpedoes. Hopman makes his decision. They're going to turn around. They're going to line up a shot. They're going to put a torpedo into that destroyer's hull and even the odds. Turn around. Prepare torpedoes. The U-boat begins its turn, swinging its bow toward the destroyer. In the torpedo room, the remaining crew members ready the weapons. They flood the tubes. They open the outer doors. They wait for the firing solution. On the USS Borie, the lookouts see what's happening. The U-boat is turning to attack. Hutchins watches through his binoculars. His ship is damaged. They're taking on water. They're slow. If that U-boat gets a torpedo off, the Borie might not survive. But Hutchins has one more trick up his sleeve. Disabled the searchlight. The order seems strange. The searchlight has been their greatest asset. It's let them track the submarine. It's let their gunners aim accurately. Why would they turn it off now? But the crew trusts their commander. The searchlight goes dark. On U-405, the men see the searchlight go out. Hopman is surprised. Why would they do that? Are they retreating? Are they trying to escape? Then it hits him. This is their chance. Without the searchlight, the destroyer can't aim accurately. They can slip away in the darkness. They can escape and maybe, just maybe, make it back to base. Abort torpedo attack. Turn to starboard. The U-boat abandons its attack run. Instead, it turns away, trying to disappear into the night. The crew breathes a collective relief. They're going to survive this. But they've forgotten something critical. The USS Borie has radar. The searchlight may be dark, but the radar never stopped tracking the submarine. On the green screen in the bridge, the radar operator watches the U-boat's every move. He calls out the bearings, the range, the course changes. Hutchins' plan has worked perfectly. The Germans think they're escaping. They think they're safe. Enabled the searchlight. The powerful beam snaps back on. It sweeps across the water. And there, caught perfectly in the light, is U-405. The submarine is directly ahead. Close. Too close to miss. Ram it. There's no hesitation from the helmsman this time. He knows what needs to be done. He steers directly for the submarine. On the U-boat, Hopman sees the destroyer bearing down on them. He sees the white water at the bow as the ship charges through the waves. He knows they can't take another ram. The hull won't survive it. Hard to port, full power. The U-boat makes a nimble turn, trying to slip past the destroyer's starboard side. The submarine is more maneuverable than the larger destroyer. If they can just get out of the way, they might avoid the collision.
Hutchins sees the move, hard to starboard. The destroyer trembles as it strains through the turn. The helmsman fights the wheel. The ship heels over at a dangerous angle, but she responds. The stern swings out toward the submarine and brings the depth charge racks into range. Fire depth charges. The canisters fly off the mounts. They arc through the air and splash down all around the submarine. Some land so close they almost hit the U-boat's deck. The U-boat crew has just seconds to brace. Then, the ocean erupts. The explosions are massive. Multiple depth charges detonate simultaneously right alongside the submarine. The combined shockwave is devastating. Inside U-405, the world ends. The pressure hull cracks. Water jets in through the ruptures with incredible force. The submarine lurches violently. Men are thrown across the compartments. The lights fail completely. The electric motors die. The submarine is mortally wounded. Water floods every compartment. The bow tilts down as the forward sections fill. The submarine begins to sink. Hopman knows it's over. Abandoned ship. The 15 survivors scramble through the hatches. They emerge onto the deck as the submarine settles lower in the water. They grab life rafts and throw them into the sea. They jump after them, hitting the freezing Atlantic water. The submarine continues to sink. The stern rises as the bow goes under. The water rushes in through the open hatches. Air escapes in massive bubbles. Then, with a final lurch, U-405 slips beneath the waves. Silence falls across the water. The storm continues. The waves roll, but the submarine is gone. Then, from the life rafts, The Germans fire flares into the sky. Red star shells burst overhead. It's the international signal for surrender. The 15 survivors of U-405 huddle in their life rafts. They're at the mercy of the sea now, and they're hoping the Americans will pick them up. On the USS Borie, Lieutenant Hutchins watches the flares. His instinct is to help. These are enemy sailors, but they're also men. Men who fought bravely, men who are now helpless in the freezing Atlantic. The destroyer inches closer to the life rafts. The crew prepares to pull the survivors aboard. It's difficult in these heavy seas, but they'll manage. Then a lookout shouts an urgent warning. Flare astern! Torpedo in the water! Everyone freezes. There's another submarine, another U-boat somewhere in the darkness, and it's just fired a torpedo at them. Hutchins reacts instantly, turns stern toward the incoming torpedo. By presenting the stern, the narrowest part of the ship, they give the torpedo the smallest possible target. It's their only chance. The turn has consequences. The stern swings around toward the German life rafts. The destroyer's wake catches the small rafts and flips them. The survivors are thrown into the water. They struggle against the waves. They shout for help. But the USS Borie can't stop, can't turn back. The torpedo is still in the water. There might be more submarines nearby. Stopping would make them an easy target. Hutchins makes the hardest decision of his life. They have to leave the Germans behind. The destroyer continues its turn. The torpedo passes harmlessly by. The suspected second submarine never attacks again. It might have been a misidentification. It might have fled. They'll never know. Behind them, the 15 survivors of U-405 struggle in the life rafts. They wait for rescue. They hope another ship will find them. But no rescue ever comes. The storm, the cold, the endless waves, one by one, the men of U-405 succumb to the Atlantic. All 15, including Kapitän Rolf-Heinrich Hopman, are lost to the sea. The USS Borie has won the engagement. The U-boat is sunk, but victory has come at a terrible cost. Deep in the engine room, the water has risen above the turbines. Chief Engineer Kenneth Miles Lucas and his men have fought for hours to keep the engines running. They've dived repeatedly beneath the surface to operate the submerged valves. They've worked in near total darkness as the water shorted out the electrical systems. But there's a limit to human endurance. There's a limit to what even the most determined men can accomplish. Lucas gives the order he's been dreading. Evacuate through the roof hatch. The engineering crew abandons their station. They climb up through the hatch to the deck above. Behind them, the water continues to rise, covering the engines, flooding the compartment. The Borie is dying. On deck, the crew assesses the damage. The ram has torn open the bow. The flooding is spreading through multiple compartments. The pumps can't keep up. The ship is settling lower in the water. Hutchins knows what this means. He keys the radio and sends out the distress signal. They need help. Fast. But they're in the middle of the North Atlantic. The storm has scattered the other ships in their group. The nearest vessels are hours away. The crew does everything they can. They shore up bulkheads. They try to isolate the flooding. They lighten the ship by throwing everything overboard that they don't absolutely need. But it's not enough. The Borie is going down. As dawn breaks, the situation becomes critical. The ship is listing heavily. Waves are washing over the deck. The main guns are underwater. Hutchins makes the hardest decision a captain can make. Abandon ship. The crew launches life rafts. They help the wounded aboard first. Then the rest of the crew follows. 122 men entered this battle. Now they're all climbing into small rafts in the middle of the Atlantic. They watch as their ship settles lower. The USS Borie has served faithfully since 1941. She's hunted submarines across the Atlantic. She's escorted countless convoys. She's protected Allied shipping. And now she's sinking. The bow goes under first. The stern rises, the propellers exposed to the air. Then, with a final shudder, the USS Borie slips beneath the waves. The crew sits in their life rafts, surrounded by the empty ocean. The storm is still raging, the waves are mountainous, the water is freezing. And they wait. Hours pass, the men huddle together in the life rafts trying to stay warm. The cold is brutal. The waves constantly wash over them. Some men are wounded from the battle. They need medical attention they can't receive out here. The strongest men try to keep spirits up. They tell jokes, they share stories, they remind each other that help is coming. But as the hours stretch on, hypothermia begins to set in. The freezing Atlantic water saps the heat from their bodies. Some men stop shivering, which is a bad sign. It means their bodies are shutting down. Finally, late in the day, a lookout spots something on the horizon. Ships. American ships. The rescue vessels approach carefully, mindful of the possibility of more U-boats in the area. They reach the life rafts and begin pulling survivors aboard. The Borie's crew is lifted onto the decks of the rescue ships. They're given blankets, hot food, medical attention. The wounded are rushed to the infirmary. But not everyone made it. 27 men from the Borie's crew of 122 perished. Some died in the battle, others succumbed to the freezing water before rescue arrived. The survivors are taken back to port. The wounded are transferred to hospitals. And slowly, the crew of the USS Borie begins to process what they've been through.
Lieutenant Commander Charles Harris Hutchins survived for the war. His actions during the battle with U-405 earned him the Navy Cross, one of the highest military decorations awarded by the United States Navy. This citation praised his aggressive pursuit, his tactical decisions, and his courage under fire. Hutchins never commanded another ship. The loss of the Borie, even in combat, weighed heavily on him. But he continued to serve, passing on his experience to a new generation of naval officers. Chief Engineer Kenneth Miles Lucas also survived. He was commended for his actions in keeping the ship's engines running despite the catastrophic flooding. His dedication saved lives. Without power, the Borie would have been helpless, and the entire crew might have been lost. The battle between the USS Borie and U-405 became one of the most famous naval engagements of World War II, not because of the strategic importance, but because of the sheer ferocity and close-quarters nature of the fight. In an age of radar, sonar, and long-range weapons, this battle was fought at point-blank range. Men threw knives and shell casings at each other. Ships rammed each other deliberately. It was naval warfare reduced to its most primitive, brutal form. The story resonated because it showed the human element of war. Behind the technology, behind the tactics and strategies, were men. Young men. Scared men. Brave men. Men who faced impossible odds and fought anyway. The Germans aboard U-405 showed remarkable courage. They surfaced their damaged submarine knowing they would face overwhelming firepower. They manned their guns despite being exposed to enemy fire. They fought until they could fight no more. 30 of them died at their posts. The remaining 15 died in the cold Atlantic, waiting for a rescue that never came. Korvettenkapitän Rolf-Heinrich Hopman was a skilled commander who made the best decisions he could with limited options. He fought his ship brilliantly, but in the end, the odds were against him. A submarine on the surface is vulnerable, and the USS Borie exploited that vulnerability with devastating effect. The American sailors aboard the USS Borie also showed extraordinary courage. They faced enemy fire without flinching. They improvised weapons when their ammunition ran low. They fought to save their ship even as it was sinking beneath them, and 27 of them gave their lives in the process. Both crews deserved respect,
Both crews were doing their duty as they understood it. The Germans were fighting for their country, for their comrades, for survival. The Americans were fighting to stop the U-boat threat that was strangling Allied supply lines. War creates these impossible situations. Young men who might have been friends in another life found themselves trying to kill each other in the middle of a storm in the North Atlantic. There's no glory in that, only tragedy. The Battle of the Atlantic was one of the longest continuous military campaigns of World War II. From 1939 to 1945, German U-boats hunted Allied convoys across the Atlantic. They sank thousands of merchant ships. They killed tens of thousands of Allied sailors and merchant seamen. The U-boats nearly won. In 1942 and early 1943, the losses were catastrophic. Ships were being sunk faster than they could be replaced. Britain was on the verge of starvation. The war effort was in jeopardy. But by late 1943, the tide had turned. New technologies like improved radar and sonar gave the Allies an edge. More escort ships were available, better tactics were developed, and the U-boats began to lose. The battle between the USS Borie and U-405 took place during this turning point. The Allies were winning the Battle of the Atlantic, but the U-boats were still dangerous. Every engagement mattered. Every submarine sunk meant fewer torpedoes threatening Allied shipping. U-405 had been operational since 1941. In its 2 years of service, it had sunk multiple Allied ships. It had survived numerous depth charge attacks. It was a veteran boat with an experienced crew. Its loss was a blow to the German submarine force. But the Germans kept building U-boats. They kept sending them out, and the Allies kept hunting them down. By 1945, the U-boat threat was effectively neutralized. Germany built over 1,100 submarines during the war. More than 700 of them were sunk. Nearly 30,000 German submariners went to sea. Roughly 75% of them never came home. It was one of the highest casualty rates of any military force in the war. The Battle of the Atlantic was a war of attrition. A brutal, grinding campaign fought in the worst weather conditions imaginable. No glory, no parades. Just men fighting and dying in the dark, freezing waters of the North Atlantic. Today, both the USS Borie and U-405 rest on the bottom of the Atlantic. The exact location of U-405 is unknown. The Borie's position was recorded, but the wreck has never been located. Perhaps it's better that way. Let them rest in peace, far from the world that destroyed them. The men who died deserve to be remembered. Not as statistics, not as numbers in a casualty report, but as individuals, sons, brothers, husbands, fathers. Men with hopes and dreams and futures that were cut short. On the American side, 27 men died. Their names are recorded on memorial walls. Their families received telegrams with the worst news imaginable. Their communities mourned. Some small towns lost multiple young men in that single battle. On the German side, all 45 men of U-405 perished. Some died in the battle. Some died in the freezing water afterward. None of them made it home. 45 families in Germany received notifications that their loved ones were lost at sea. 45 families spent years, perhaps decades, hoping for news that never came. War is often discussed in terms of victories and defeats, strategies and tactics, heroes and villains. But at its core, war is about loss. The loss of young lives, the loss of potential, the loss of what might have been. Every man aboard the Borie and U-405 was someone's son. They were loved. They mattered. And they all found themselves caught up in something far larger than themselves. A global conflict that swept them up and carried them to a frozen ocean, thousands of miles from home. What is courage? Is it the absence of fear? No. Every man in that battle was afraid. Fear is natural. Fear is human. Fear keeps us alive. Courage is acting despite fear. Courage is doing what needs to be done even when every instinct screams to run away. The German sailors who rushed to man the deck guns showed courage. They knew they were exposed. They knew the destroyer's guns were aimed at them, but they went anyway. Their ship needed them. Their comrades needed them. So they climbed out of the hatch and took their positions, even though many of them knew they wouldn't survive. The American sailors who fought to save the Borie showed courage. As the ship sank beneath them, as water flooded the compartments, they stayed at their posts. Chief Engineer Lucas and his men operated the engines while standing in chest-deep water. They dove beneath the surface to reach submerged valves. They kept the ship running as long as physically possible. That's courage. Not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Lieutenant Hutchins showed courage too. Not just in the battle itself, but in the decisions he made. The decision to ram the submarine knowing it could sink his own ship. The decision to leave the German survivors behind when he thought there was another submarine nearby. The decision to abandon ship when he knew there was no saving her. Command is lonely. A captain makes decisions that affect the lives of everyone under his command. When those decisions lead to casualties, the weight of that responsibility never truly goes away. Hutchins carried that weight for the rest of his life. He was honored for his actions, but he also lost his ship and 27 of his crew. That's not something you simply get over.
But the ocean remains. The North Atlantic is still cold, still dangerous, still indifferent to human affairs. Ships still cross those waters, though now they're mostly commercial vessels rather than warships. Somewhere beneath those waves rest the USS Borie and U-405. The metal is corroding. The structures are collapsing. Nature is slowly reclaiming what humans built. But the stories remain. The courage remains. The sacrifice remains. We tell these stories not to glorify violence, but to honor those who faced it. To remember that history is made by individuals, not just nations. That behind every statistic is a person. That every war casualty was someone's son, brother, husband, father. The battle between the USS Borie and U-405 lasted only a few hours, but its impact echoes down through the decades. It reminds us of what people are capable of, both in terms of violence and courage. It shows us the best and worst of humanity, compressed into a few desperate hours. And it reminds us that peace is precious, that the freedom to live without fear of war is something to be cherished and protected, not through more wars, but through understanding, cooperation, and the recognition that we're all human beings sharing this planet. The men who fought that night didn't have a choice. They were caught up in a global conflict beyond their control. But we have choices. We can choose to remember their sacrifice. We can choose to learn from their example. We can choose to work toward a world where such sacrifices become less necessary. That's how we truly honor the fallen, not just by remembering how they died, but by working to ensure others don't have to die the same way. The USS Borie fought her last battle on November 1st, 1943. U-405 sank that same night. 95 men fought, 72 died, and the ocean continued rolling, indifferent to the small human drama played out on its surface. But we're not indifferent. We remember, we honor, we learn. And we carry their stories forward so that future generations will know what was sacrificed for the world we live in today. Rest in peace, sailors of the USS Borie and U-405. Your courage will not be forgotten. Your sacrifice will not be in vain. You are remembered.